Hello. Are we streaming? Excellent. Looks like we're streaming. I have a picture. Okay. Straight into it today. What I want to do is I want to go through my local server setup, and I want to talk about things like Forgejo. I'm going to pronounce it. Apparently Esperanto. I want to talk about integration with Hermes and how I'm solving a few problems locally. So the goal, I've got a screen up here. Whoops. I've got a screen up here which is an Excalibur image that just talks about my local setup. So you can, let me just leave a message in. Hi all. Just going through some local Debian Git and what else? Git and Hermes configuration. Feel free to ask questions. Okay, I should have that pre-copied into some text. I will get better at this. So we're looking at the screen now, and this orange box is essentially my house. So we're looking at, there's no ingress, so I don't open up any ports to the outside world. So this is sort of defining a my laptop and then a Debian server, which I've had for about a month. The goals of this video, well, the goals of my setup, let's look at what the goals of my setup are. So what I want to have is I want to have a personal always on server, and I want to take advantage of that for security reasons, cost reasons, automation reasons. For years, I've just used a laptop. I have not had anything running at home. And what I've found is I really like my MacBook Air, my M3 at the moment, and at some point I will upgrade. But what I've been doing for all these years is running Docker Desktop, or I use Rancher these days, but running all of my tools on my machine. And when I'm doing upgrades, everything gets shut down, obviously, and I restart everything all the time. And what I've found is what I really want to get into is I want to be able to follow the trail of being able to run local models. Because I kind of think if I'm looking at the improvements that I see, I was watching a video the other day, which was using a new release of Quen, I think, and, you know, the typical examples of building games and things like that. It takes a while, but it's doable. And so I kind of want to be able to take access of that, take advantage of you know, this movement that we're in, because I do find that AI increases my productivity. So there's that. And I was looking at my MacBook and going, I want to have more capacity. I want to be able to have more grunt, but I don't want to be carrying around a very large machine. I really want to carry around my MacBook Air. And there was at that point that I sort of decided to go, after I saw some examples of OpenClaw, I decided that it was worth getting a server for the first time in quite a long time. I think I ran a MacBook Mini Minecraft 15 years ago for the kids. So my goals are an always-on server. I want to be able to offload some of the work my MacBook Air is doing. So I'll still do local development on my Air. So I've still got Docker on there, or Rancher. I've still got my editors and whatnot. I want to be able to use as much established open source as possible. So what I do see with people who are setting up, who are sort of riding the wave of like Hermes and OpenClaw, and obviously there's a lot of, like, you can do, like, it will do a lot with you just interfacing with it using natural language. I kind of am opinionated about stuff. Like, so I don't want to get into a situation where I go, hey, I want to be able to host Git on my machine and then have AI build, a GitHub clone. And that goes for quite a lot of things. There's really established solutions for most of the things that I want to do. So my goal is to be able to use as much open source as possible and to use established open source, like old open source. My goal is number 4 there is I want to be able to, I really want to be able to have a lot of flex in terms of, I want to be a consumer that is ready to shift to local models, especially as I learn what I'm doing and streamline it. And I want to have a lot of control over price. A really interesting example of price is that I've been using Minimax M3 and for the last month. And I kind of chat with it every couple of days. I do some work and I do some setup on the server. And I've spent $20 in tokens in the month. So I'm not a heavy user of AI in terms of mass automation and creating sub-agents and stuff like that. So I feel like I should have a lot of control and a lot of power over choosing to use local models when I can. And so a lot of that involves just learning and working out what my best practice is going to be. Sorry, the screen's going to be pretty boring at the moment, except for me talking. What else have we got here? So decouple from GitHub. I think that GitHub is kind of screwy. It's certainly not got great uptime over the last X amount of time. And my personal view is one of the reasons for that is so in the pursuit of business, in the pursuit of growth, in the pursuit of grift and getting investment and circular economies around AI. GitHub is really, really focused, like it wants those vibe coders, and those vibe coders are giving GitHub what it wants, which is a heck of a lot of activity. And so in watching what people are doing and watching how, the LMs work, I can sort of see that they create a lot of noise for GitHub, and I personally think that Microsoft is in a bit of a quandary in terms of what its strategy is for GitHub, because it needs those vibe coders because it wants to sell Copilot. Like, you kind of get the idea. And so what I want to be able to do is I don't want to be part of that space. You run out of action minutes quite quickly. And so I want to be free from that. So if I've got a local always on server, I want it to do some work for me. And if I can get it to do some work that an action might do, such as running tests or building an artifact or whatever, that's definitely something I want to look at and do. Number 6 here is I have a very small business. What do? I do things like I look at tenders on government tender portals. I have Xero, create invoices. I'm a consultant mainly, occasionally doing web projects and stuff where I bring in other people and subcontract. But then the other half of that is that for my own personal enjoyment, I want to be able to create content, and creating content is so I've intentionally set up free space to kind of merge the content creation with the business from a marketing point of view. So, in other words, I think it boils down to doing what I like in public and sharing it and having an open source sensibility towards sharing knowledge, and then being seen or having people go, oh, I resonate with that guy, I want to work with that guy. And then I've chucked a goal on the end there, which is, at the moment, a lot of the stuff that I'm doing, other than the use of Slack, which I'll show, everything is on my local network. So I'm not trying to access anything externally. So I guess that's not a goal. At the moment, I'm putting that on the back burner. I'm not trying to solve that. I'm not trying to be in LA and in do maintenance of my machine from LA or whatever. So that's kind of like the goals that I'm trying to achieve. Well, sort of what I want to show in this video is trying to target these goals. I'm going to cover in this video just the server setup, the choice of Debian and why. I've got some stuff to look at with Nginx and Drupal and Forgejo and an actions runner within that context. So when you see Forgejo, you can just think maybe GitLab is probably the best thing to think of, because everyone thinks, oh, self-hosted, I'll self-host GitLab. I want to talk about the decision to use Forgejo and Hermes. Hermes setup and the Slack interface as a kind of a side topic. What are the website goals? So just to get into it, this is the website as kind of schwammy or kind of like tacky as it might look. I just like doing photography I like taking snaps around cities, and so I'm using that photography for my thumbs. And so I have actually updated YouTube with some of these thumbs, so I've got some of these old things. I'm still haven't quite worked it out, because my YouTube does look a little bit weird when these thumbs come up and there's no context. I realized myself as a YouTube user that I definitely look at the thumbs to get context, so there's a bit of strategy. But at the moment, I'm just kind of combine my use of thumbnails with just the opportunity just to chuck images that I find visually interesting. So we're sort of looking at this website, which hasn't really got much going on. Mainly articles, a homepage, which I'm sort of wanting to tidy up and update over time. I've got an articles, and we've got an articles page. So this is definitely just an unfinished website, just FYI. So when I look at the goals that I'm trying to hit, I want to keep using Drupal, and the reason for that is, well, firstly, I think it's a very good product, but the reality is that for this website, the use of Drupal is massive overkill. So, but there are reasons I don't really have an opportunity to show Drupal stuff off without having an active Drupal site. I mean, I like working on things that are public, things that exist, things that I like saying, hey, here's a thing that exists, here's what you can do with it. I think that's why I'm trying to lean into doing streams, because I kind of like the feel of sort of surfing a wave of something that's real and talking about it. It's sort of what kind of turns me on. So I want to do Drupal, and Drupal hosting, you're going to get Drupal hosting. So decent Drupal hosting where like it's a decent pipeline. Like you're sort of talking about something like Upsun. They used to be called Platform SH. And so for me, you sort of always drift to the $100 AUD. No matter how much you squeeze it, you're always going to set $50 to $100. There's different ways that you can do it. Like as an agency, if you work with Upsun, you get one free site and you can put your own agency website on that. But I'm trying to set things up in such a way that I don't 6 months from now go, oh, you know what, I've been spending $100 on this thing, I want to stop. And then having to put effort into reorganizing. So I want to do low cost right from the outset here. And so I have been hosting this site for quite a while on S3, on Amazon S3. And there's a tool called Tome, which essentially takes that Drupal site and generates a static version of that site. That I then pushed to S3. And not only is that that cost me 5 cents a month or something crazy like that, but not only is that a great cost option, it's a fantastic security option, because I am flaky. Like I will get into a zone of where I'm working on something and I don't really want to be tracking Drupal updates for my website. I don't want to go, oh, there's a new security update. Oh, everyone's talking about it. Let's do a deployment. I just want to go, nah, my stuff's out there statically. There's nothing, I have nothing to do until I'm in the headspace of working on the site and I want to do updates for my local instance of this Drupal site. And then the last thing is that one of the things I want to show with Hermes in this video is I want it to be easy to add content to my site. So the idea is I create a video. I want to easily be able to update my site with that video. And what I personally find is I work very well with the kind of like, you know, I'm really good in like a 10-person company where I've got resources to execute tasks because my head sits in a strategic space half the time, and switching my head from a strategic space into a doing space, I find it very difficult, and I think it's like part of how my brain works. But I might be able to, you know, half the time I've got a new video and I want to post it into my site and it's very easy. I just log in, I just do it, I just deploy it or whatever. But I also want to be able to do things where, hey, Hermes, I need to create an invoice for that customer, and I just chat to someone about it and that gets done. So the goal, so with the website, I do want to have this set up right from scratch where I can easily generate content for the website and do maintenance tasks just using AI, just using LM. So that's all the stuff. If we come back over here to this design, so I've got my MacBook Air, I've got Debian. Let's get some sidebar stuff out of the way here. I've got the Debian server, sidebar back, view, how do you go view, sidebar, toolbars, sidebar. What do you do that? How do you use, oh, there it is, pin it. So the machine that I've got is, I think effectively this one. You know, it's a bit more than I'd pay for. Actually, I would say it's probably similar to buying a new Air. But what I really wanted to do with this machine is I wanted to defer the process of having to buy a really good machine. So I feel like at the moment I can keep going with my MacBook Air M3 for quite a while, and eventually I'll get the M5 or M6 Air. So this is the machine that I got, and I just wanted to make sure it was kind of chunky enough to be able to do some, I think from what I can tell, I'm not really good at hardware, but from what I can tell, it's like an okay games machine. It's not a crazy machine. And it's an extra slot. So at the moment I've just got one slot of 32 gigabytes RAM and 1 terabyte of storage. So sort of enough space there to grow. And also what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to manage it in well, and that I'm making good decisions about what I put on there and what I run on there. So we've got on that machine, we've got for I'm gonna have to know how to pronounce that at some stage. So it'd be Forgejo. I've got runners, I've got Nginx for web hosting. I'm doing OpenTelemetry for logging off to Google monitoring. I haven't set these gray ones, I haven't set up yet. So there's Google Cloud CLI. That's going to be I want to be able to do backups to, cloud storage. Also in grey up here, Tailscale, so I can get in here from the outside. But how I get in from the outside, quote unquote, at the moment, I can do a fair few things by just using Slack, because I have Hermes configured to talk to Slack, and so I can talk to Hermes through Slack. And FYI, I call Hermes colloquially Nash. Colloquially, I call Hermes Nash. So that's kind of like what's on there. I've also got Hermes at the moment can talk to Xero, can talk to Todoist with a couple of skills. one sentence context, Hermes is a harness, and I've found that it works best. Definitely works best if it's just you are the only operator of your Hermes and you set up skills that do things that you want to do in your way. I did do some experimentation where I had a second user accessing Hermes and I found the context went to poop. It tried to keep storing all these conflicting memories about the two different users. So yeah, Hermes is just one that I access. All right, so if I jump on to the server, so this just logs me on as my user. And if I list, say, the home directory, you can see Forgejo uses Git and Hermes has its own, is the user Git. Hermes has its own directory where the Hermes installation sits. Forgejo has a runner user, so for actions, and then I have my user. And I'll jump in here periodically just to look at some configuration as I go along. I think it's interesting to get to that, like the visual stuff. And what I really wanted to do was have a very visual way of looking at my stuff. So maybe if I just jump into the Forgejo. So here's the website. Here's the Drupal website, which sits on GitHub at the moment. And what I really wanted to be able to do was to make this a mirror of a local Git. And so if I jump over to Forgejo, you can see that, or can you see, where am I? So here's the same code base that sits on that machine, and so you see that basically you can see exactly what Forgejo is just by looking at this. If you use Git or anything, GitHub or GitLab, you're right in the zone here. It's a fork of Gitea, Gitea, and so it's got a bit of history, and I've noticed that as I use this, that it's super fast. It's and maybe that's just because if I go btop, you can see here that, so this is just btop. This is an alternative to top where I can look at processes on the Debian server. So you can see there that I've got Forgejo that's running there, and I'm not very good at this app, but I think I've filtered that now. So I wonder if I can quit that and just do that again. Btop. Okay, so you can see here there's Forgejo here, and you can see it's got 273 megabytes of memory. And at the moment, the server's just doing nothing. So the fact that I'm the single user here is I'm actually playing to that as a strength, because I don't have to face multiple people who are hitting this application at the same time. So me being the only user and this thing being on and well provisioned means that I've got kind of no problems with my interacting with this. It's just and also it's just running. It's kind of just running Git under the hood. So I can choose whether or not to. So in the case of the website, I've got, if I go into the settings for the website code and I go to still learning, there's a mirror here. So you can see I've got it mirrored to GitHub, and so it's periodically pushing up to GitHub. And generally speaking, I'm finding my performance of this like way faster than GitHub. I don't have to deal with it being in the cloud and it sometimes being a bit laggy. My performance is very, very fast. And also the performance, what happens is that if I quit out of btop, let's just clear this. So if I was to open a new tab and log in as Hermes, SSH Nash, and go and have a look at the repos, and there's the free source repo. So the repository sits right here in the Hermes user, and effectively I allow Hermes to interact with it and push to it. But if I do git remote show origin, you can see that the origin is Forgejo, right? So what happens there is internally in the server, if Hermes is doing some changes to the code base, it's getting pushed and pulled to that local server. And what I do is just give Hermes its own branch called nash local, and through that, and it's effectively, and it was really interesting actually, it's one of those examples of where the way the world works is not always the way you want to work in a particular situation. When I was first setting this up, it wanted to do pull requests all the time, and I'm like, I don't want you to do pull requests. Everything is very linear. If I need to, because I know Git, if I need to, I can come in here and I can maintain something. If I need you to make a pull request, I'll ask. But it was really interesting when I was setting up the skill for doing code pushing, pulling. It was like, it set up a whole process for doing pull requests, and I just like, I don't want these. I've got a main branch where I'm doing deployments myself. I just need you to do stuff on your branch and treat it just like you're a developer who doesn't know Git and just pushing and pulling to that location. And yeah, so you've got the repository. So I've got my UI that I can access locally. And in fact, what I do is I take advantage of Safari's ability to put a website in the dock, quote unquote. So I actually get an app as such, which is just the website running inside a Safari container. So I'm not logged in there, so I'm just going to go back to the web view rather than muck around. So I sort of get the best of all worlds when I've got a GitHub-like UI for the code, and also the code's positioned in such a way that the automated things that I set up can access the code and do what they need to do with the code. I am not really using any of this other stuff, but I am using actions. And so what I found when I was setting this, I'm like, this is great. What game is this? You're a top fan of this video specifically, Kevin. So as I was working on this this setup, I kind of had started looking at automation of certain things, and I had a few choices. I was like, oh, I can just use a cron tab, and I can get Hermes to use a cron tab, or and then Hermes has its own SQLite database for tracking of to-dos and tasks and things, and sure, but going back to the goal of trying to keep everything as generic as possible, try to keep everything as like existing open source established tools as possible, I stopped and I thought, how do I want to do the running of tasks? And for 99% of things that I do, I'm wanting to run tasks in the context of like a runner, GitHub Actions, for example. So even though the impulse is to look at actions as being very related to code and about building, effectively you're responding to an event in usually pushing, and you're running a script. Most of the GitHub actions, at the end of the day, they have the actual run part is a script or a command, and most of the things that I want to do are also that. So even though I still have access to my to-do application, Todoist, and I still have access to cron tabs and things like that, what I really wanted was an actions UI. If I go back to the server and I go btop, you can see that there's a Forgejo runner, and so that's always there, and if I do a push to the code base, it will run. So let's have a look at this task. I have this task which is set up on the website. if I might even be best to open up the code at this point. So I'll just, so here is the code base I've used the Z editor, and I've actually opened off the server and it gives a bit of context about where things are sitting. So I'm looking at this. I'm logged in as over SSH locally to the server as the Hermes user. And so you can see that there's a repos folder, and what I do is I give it access to any code that I want it to access here. So in the free source code base checkout, you can see that there's workflows, there's actions, just like you would see for any runners, like if you think GitHub Actions or anything. At the end of the day, they're YAML or XML or whatever, JSON, and they define a set of tasks. So I've got my build tome task here, and it responds to the push to the branch Nash local at this stage. Just if I push or Hermes pushes to that branch, and it doesn't normally, a task would do a full build of like all of the code base, and this, I didn't want to do that. I just wanted to build the files for S3 whenever there was a push to the repo, so I can then review and look at those and look at that static site in a preview. So all it's doing is just running this this script that's inside the repo. Okay, so that's all this task is doing. It's essentially just running this build script to build the static version of the site in preparation for pushing it to S3. So that's fine. Like, I could run this bash script. I could put this on a cron tab. I could do a whole bunch of different things with this script. But what I really want is I want a tried and tested UI for managing this action. So I'm looking at the actions history. You can see I was doing some debugging, I was doing some setup, and if I click on any of these actions, I get I get all of the same output that I would get if I'm looking at GitHub Actions or any other CI tool. It has, the jobs and has descriptions of the jobs. And again, what I really like, if I rerun this job, I find it to be, because I'm the only user of an app that's there sitting there running on the server, it's just so fast. That's doing quite a lot. That's doing a drush, a command in Drupal, which is generating a static site. So there's a fair bit of work that goes on there for it to do that. This is a pretty small site at this stage. These are all the article pages that are being generated one by one. But it has enough resources to do a pretty good job of this pretty fast. And so I can have this run. So not only can I have this running on every push, I can do this on demand if I wanted to do this on demand. So, I effectively have the actions going on here, and I think the next thing to look at would be the interaction between Hermes and the site. So what I'll do is I'll just kick off a job with Hermes while I talk about it. So let's go to YouTube and let's pick a random video. YouTube Real Civil Engineer. And I'll just do a local demonstration of, okay, so let's imagine that I'm a real civil engineer. I want to put a new site on the website. And so I'll open up one of these videos, jump in and grab the URL, and then I'll jump into Slack. So I did a little bit of a test before. So this is the Slack interface to Hermes. Right, so I'm sitting in here, I'm sitting in Slack. You can see I'm doing a little bit of work earlier on styling because I'm just trying to get the site back up and running. And so I'm in here and I go, Nash, post this video to the free source site. It is another test. Last time I did this, it said, hey, actually, this is what you're posting here is not a free source site. It's actually where was it? It's like, oh, you're posting a a video from another channel, and I had to say, well, actually, don't worry, it's just a test. I'm not going to publish this to the actual website. So I'm just going to kick this off. So I'm saying to the bot, this is another test. Don't worry, it's not free source content. So I have that going. I have on the local machine, I've got the site here. So here I'm in www.edit-edit.free. So this is pointing to the Debian server, and it's pointing to a virtual host in Nginx. Okay, so I'm here, so I'm in a normal Drupal site here. Whereas if I was to go to the public site at this, like from here, and I go to say the user page, like this is a static site on S3, there's nothing going on here. But if I'm on my local editing one, I can do all of the normal Drupal things that I would normally do. Like I can work with the content modeling, so the article content modeling, and I can add fields. I can look at reports, local logging. I can, it's just me on here at the moment, so I just have one admin user. So I think this is really important because you'd say, but what about if I was going to add other users? Obviously, I'd have to open it up to the world and have to add other users. I just don't see that this is the pathway for my business anyway. So it's definitely not an impending problem. I'm happy to be the only user on this website at the moment and to be the only one to have access to it, while it being a Drupal site because the other thing is I can do videos about this site, not really concerned about exposing any secrets or security issues and things like that. It's not a publicly accessible site. So if I was to go to the status report, for example, and you'd say, oh, okay, so this this site might have some errors saying it's not quite up to date, and someone might be like, hey, I know you've got that security vulnerability. Well, I don't have that. I don't really have that problem because this is not accessible. This is as if this is running on my own laptop. You can see here that in that time we're discussing that Hermes has finished the job of posting that. It also adds a lot of stuff which I like to read. I like to see some of its thinking. But you can see here there's this new site here. And if I go back to articles, so again, this header is a bit broken just because I'm doing some rework, but there you can see the article there. So that's kind of like the vibe of what I'm going for. I'm going for this thing where I say, hey, hey Nash, I want to do X, Y, and Z. And that's working pretty well. Just trying to think if there's anything else that I haven't really covered here. What was my existing goals? I could go into some of the configuration, but I think they're fine for future videos. Could go into logging. I've talked about the mirroring. And I didn't really talk about Nginx, but it's not really that much to show. So if I just go back to this user CD, so isolating the users means that Hermes can't configure Nginx. Some people would probably want Hermes or OpenClaw to be able to configure the local server, and I've got a separation of concerns to a degree. So a lot of the things that I'm doing here, like I know my vibe coder would not do these the same way because I'm kind of locking down things where I'm going to do it. I want to do that. I want to configure that tool. I want to be able to do hardening. I want to be able to log it, do logging. So I'm using my user to inspect the Nginx configuration. So Nginx and sites enabled. So I've just got the editing. Now Hermes can access this but Hermes has different strategies for updating the Drupal site. It can technically log in, but for a lot of things it does. It just programmatically creates content because Drupal has a very robust content modeling system and very robust in the sense of you can edit content in many different ways. And I've got Hermes set up I just said to Hermes, I want you to programmatically work with the content, and it does, but it can log in if it needed to. And then I've also got the static site test. So when the code gets pushed, so if we're looking at, if the code gets pushed to get to the repo or something triggers the site to be statically generated. So I'll do that now. I don't currently have a trigger when content gets updated. So the static generation test does not trigger because content isn't in Git. Now there are ways to do that. There's ways to export a lot of content from Drupal to code, and I used to have them in this website, and I chose to not do that at one point. So look, I think the long and the short is at the moment the content's not in. The content doesn't trigger the job to generate a static website. So if I'm in here and if I go into the content and I edit this content and I save it and say summary, blah, 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 that's it. I think there's a couple of things that it needs that it doesn't have. So I just think I can save. So if I saved that at the moment, I don't have a trigger to run the job. If I come over to the job here, the job hasn't run to generate the static HTML, but I can rerun that manually. So if I go into the last job, rerun all jobs. Now that I've run that, I can then go to here and I can go to this website. And this is the local static test. If it's working at the moment, maybe it's not working at the moment. Oh yeah. It's trying to redirect to that page. Definitely not working at the moment. I think it's not able to load the CSS files based on the last change that I did. So maybe that's a bit of a work in progress that I've just currently been working on. There we go. So here's the website as broken as it is. If I was to go to the articles page from the pen, I should see, so there's the new article. So this is the as bit broken, but this is the static generation of the website. And so this is for me to look at and go, yep, I'm happy. And then I can push the generated static site to S3 at that point. And so I've kind of got that gate where periodically I can then do a push of the latest articles, because at the end of the day, no one's coming here to see my articles. They're getting them off YouTube. So this is really just for marketing, to be able to, for someone who's looking up free source to go, oh, what's free source? Oh, they come here and they see the videos. I think I'm going to leave that here. I think a lot of the stuff is a bit obvious and I'd just be ranting on about it if I was to talk about it. But yeah, I think if I just leave that diagram up there just to end the video off. So my name is Simon, or Cy, or Simesy, or whatever. And my company's Free Source, and I thank you for joining and watching the video, and I hope you have a really good day.